highlight of today's occasion, we have a prestigious guest. Let me introduce our keynote speaker for the day, Professor Bharat H. Desai. Professor Desai is Jawaharlal Nehru Chair and Professor of International Law at the Center for International Legal Studies, School of International Studies of Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. He is the editor-in-chief of Yearbook of International Environmental Law, Oxford University Press, and Environmental Policy and Law, Amsterdam IOS Press. Professor Desai has been consulted by the ADB, ICIMOD, IHDP, SACEP, UNEP, UNU, World Bank, and by the Union Ministers of Environment and Forest and External Affairs, and he has served in the official Indian delegation to several intergovernmental negotiations. Professor Desai is a beaming figure in the global scholarly discourse for our better common environmental future. Dear sir, we are delighted to have you join us today. I cordially invite you to deliver the keynote speech.
Well, good afternoon to everyone. I'm indeed delighted to join virtually on the occasion of this 40th anniversary celebrations of the Central Environmental Authority of Sri Lanka. It's indeed always a pleasure to interact, in person or online, with our Sri Lankan friends and colleagues, especially my old friend, Professor Kamina Gunaratne and Professor Sarveshwaran. I'm not much familiar about the other guests on the dais, but it's a pleasure to join through this, and in the wake of these few minutes of my observations, I thought I'll just flag few of the things which may be relevant in the rapidly changing context. At the outset, the announcement said that, well, the good economic policy is always a good environmental policy. And that is exactly I would say the crux of the matter, that is it really so? Is it so? The world over, if one looks at, there is a huge churning going on. In fact, I already pasted few of the links and of the recent works, in the chat box. Please, possibly try to look at them, So, even during the pandemic period, like we did something like 50th anniversary of the journal which I happened to edit, and I put together a panel of some about 23 eminent scholars from all five continents, and the volume which came out even at the height of this pandemic, is entitled as Our Earth Matters, and some of the churning which has been done, by different scholars, across different jurisdictions, different countries, for instance. That is exactly what the Club of Rome, just before the 1972 Stockholm Conference had observed at what is called the world problematic, and a very kind of a very disturbing, I would say, the kind of the predicament, And so at the heart of this, what is called the environmental and economic, regulatory policies, legislation, and the governance architecture, which has been put into place by various countries, in different over last 50 years or so. That is exactly where this predicament lies, that what is that threshold, because you need most of the resources, and other things for human survival, We are saying that, well, it's not only the human beings which are the only species on this planet Earth, but there are others also, you have the fauna and flora and a huge amount of other things. But even as I would say, the predominant, and this is exactly what has come out in the anthropogenic working groups, decision in May 2019, that now we live in the age of Anthropocene. There is a telltale human imprint, strong human imprint, so far as the Earth's ecological balance itself is concerned, So the question which we need to really confront, as I put that issue, is thinking aloud and ahead, and while doing so, we need to little look back, as to what has actually transpired. Have we actually achieved the objectives with which this entire global regulatory enterprise was put into place over last 50 years or so? Why does the global environment still continue to deteriorate? I don't need to enumerate the variety of those challenges which are being faced, by people around the world, but it's a very, very gloomy picture. So gloomy picture. I think all that you need to do is to simply find from the United Nations official website or from the Google, the observations of the Secretary of United Nations, Antonio Guterres. It paints a very, 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 very bleak picture. That unless we move in swiftly, unless we do something like what he said, at the 26th meeting of the Conference of Party in Glasgow, for instance, that this entire small window of opportunity which is being said, we still don't know. Yes, there would be some kind of variations and some difference of opinion with respect to the scientific warnings and observations which have been done, because there is also it's a fact that there is the politics of science also. There is the politics of science also, and as we saw, the different countries which try to play this ball game, in this global regulatory enterprise, and most of these what is called the multilateral environmental negotiation, having been participant and being privy to these regulatory processes, being part of how the mutual check, they try to checkmate each other, on and try to even fight over that small phraseology, for instance, like you saw at the 26th meeting of the COP, the entire issue was about the exit of coal, now the fossil fuel, and especially the thermal power generation, which is now the main bone of contention, But then the question remains as to what do you do about the requirements of the countries concerned. So you need to basically, the entire predicament which I alluded to, refers to the trying to work out a balance, between your developmental requirements and your environmental compulsions, because that is exactly what do you want to leave it, for the posterity or for the future generations, like the the city of Delhi. Sorry. Often, during this winter months, witnesses a heavy smog, There is almost the Supreme Court of India, which was seized of this matter, almost gave order, for closure of the schools and colleges and other things. For instance, the national contingency plan was literally put into place. So why have we created a situation where you need to literally run away from the cities? And the question is, where do you go? Do you have any option? So I think that is exactly the predicament, which we have been facing, and you need to take a call on that. That is this worth it? Are we on the correct path? Do we need to really do what is called the prognosis and try to do kind of a futuristic thinking? And so the volume which was released on the World Environment Day on the 5th of June 2021, Our Earth Matters, with the subtitle, The Pathways to a Better Common Environmental Future. So the seminal issues concerning that predicament, how the different scholars from different jurisdictions have been doing, Now the second phase, which we will soon be witnessing, will be on 2nd and 3rd of June 2022, when 50 years of the first UN Conference on Human Environment will be celebrated in the Swedish capital, Stockholm. And probably if you recall, in 1972, there are only two heads of government who were present in Stockholm. The host country Prime Minister Olof Palme, and second was, the other Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and of course, both of them, they are no more. They were subsequently assassinated, And the question has been that what do you do in fact, this was the question I asked, to the Secretary General of the Olof Palme International Center, saying that assuming that Olof Palme was alive, and if he was he happened to be the Prime Minister of Sweden, and if he takes the floor, on 2nd of June 2022, what he would say. And that she was really charged, the Secretary General was charged, and she wrote me a beautiful piece, looking back to look ahead, And so what would Olof Palme? And this is exactly what I try to do with a former member of the Indian delegation, Indira Gandhi's delegation, Dr. Karan Singh, who was who happened to be chancellor of my university, very celebrated statesman, he's now in his 90s, 90s, and I said, well, if Indira Gandhi was alive, what she would have spoken, So he has given me a small piece, which I'm likely to publish maybe in one of the forthcoming issues. So I think the kind of the prognosis which is sought to be done by heads of state, heads of government, and the governmental delegation, you could see it vividly as to the kind of the polemics comes in, the kind of the very, very narrow, parochial, domestic interests of the countries really take over. They do really take over. And then the question is, what do you do? What do you do? Because it's basically the general people, population, which really pays the price, Huge amount of, if you are alive to that situation, there is as I call it, hail the pandemic. Much before the COVID-19 pandemic came, there is a huge health pandemic at work, We have not yet estimated the kind of the cost that you are paying, through inhaling the foul air, the polluted water, the huge amount of noise pollution, and the multiplicity of the health elements, which are triggered because of your constant exposure to the foul air, water, and these noise pollution. It will be, I would say, unbelievable kind of the cost that we are really paying. And the question will be, is it really worth it? And so I think from that global context, if we have to really try to do it, I have tried to look at this issue from the South Asian regional context also, from the and if you see it, I think that not much kind of a cohesion and kind of a interlinkages, between the members of the South Asian, this region itself, and most of the countries end up doing that kind of a virtual firefighting, and each of the country in the South Asian region have their own problem. India has own insurmountable problems, which will not include the cities and the rural areas and your national parks and sanctuaries, your river bodies, your, everything, all areas, it's amazing, each time whenever the matter goes before the Supreme Court of India and the National Green Tribunal, they lambast them, but the show goes on, for instance, And so I think in this particular context, the core issue, or you need to zero in on the entire architecture of the policies, legislative framework, and the institutional mechanism which has been put into place, like the Central Environment Authority in case of Sri Lanka. We don't have that kind of a omnipotent, over kind of a arcing kind of a authority, although there has been a call for doing that, but it's a segmented thing. We have another set of machinery called the pollution control boards, and this issue has often been coming up, and the economic interests, they really take over, often you have this huge controversy about many of these developmental projects. You have the huge highways coming up, you have the railway lines being laid, they run through the national parks and sanctuaries, and you are creating live hazards. I've not yet tracked the latest figure, but numerous big species like elephants get run over by the fast moving trains, from India's national parks and sanctuaries, for instance. Rhinos get killed, for instance. Huge amount, because they are migratory in nature. They do migrate. They need a huge kind of a area where they move around, for instance. Like the lions from the Gir National Park, for instance, they do migrate because the habitat is shrinking. So there is that kind of a constant tug of war between the human requirements and the needs of the animals. So there is a proverbial that man-animal conflict which is going there, which is basically a developmental kind of a tug of war which has been going on. And we don't have any kind of, I would say, a finality of answer so far as what precisely you need to do. But I have already pasted one small observation which I did, at the beginning of my career, in a journal published by Pergamon Press called the Social Science and Medicine. Already pasted the Threats to the World Ecosystem, a role for the social scientists, where I had made that little observation. This was actually, pointed out, by one of my doctoral students, and I'll just read it out. The lack of awareness among the people and lack of will on the part of the decision makers has landed us into a sordid state when it is feared that if the current pace persists, people will be forced to move with gas masks in some of the mega cities in the not too distant future. This was the journal in 1992, almost 20, 28, 29 years. So that is exactly the predicament, that the reality which we have faced now. When you write as a scholar, you never want it, or never think that well, this reality will, but it is virtually like all of us, we move with a gas mask, all of us, we move with a gas mask, for instance. And so I think that is exactly, you need to do, you need to take a call on that really part. You need to work out that balancing exercise. That is exactly what this I would say the regulatory enterprise is all about. How best do you do the balancing, amidst all the vested interests, developmental pressure which are there, because those pressures are genuine. Development requirements is there. You need to have, for instance, have electricity generation. Whether you want to have it through the fossil fuels, through the coal-based thermal power, coal-driven thermal power stations, or you move to the renewables, for instance, like the solar, like the International Solar Alliance, which India has mooted, and it is still to take off, although there are a large number of countries which have joined the thing. Nobody is yet to, because the cost, of solar power generation and the other options, like the hydro is one of the other, but hydro also has its problems in terms of the, location of the dams in many of the seismic areas, for instance, and like they say, the nature strikes back, whenever you do take that excessive liberty, excessive, permissiveness with what the nature ordains for you, for instance. So you have the flip side of most of these. All that you need to do is to do that cost benefit analysis, proverbially, like, and then say that if your benefits are more, you need to accordingly work out here. That is exactly the beauty of this regulatory enterprise, but there is no, I would say, the best way out, out of that. So the only thing which we will end up, dealing with, if you ask a common person, and this is normally a question which is asked by most of the people, then what do you do? Do you wait till the governments and the institutional machinery really, delivers things? Are they the saviors? If they don't do it, what? Because ultimately you need to breathe air. You need to survive. Without clean air, like during the pandemic period when the entire lockdowns were imposed, the roads were empty, the traffics, all the same automobile lobbies which are saying that, well, we can't stop, gas guzzlers from being put on your roads. We can't stop production. Economy will suffer. And you saw that. Like Delhi's air was literally, you could see the blue sky, So that shows precisely what matters. And you could see the same, now it is a bounce back, with a huge unfolding of the economy, because that is also required. So your predicament, you need to squarely address that. What do you do? And I would say the ultimate salvation will lie, in minimizing your needs. Each individual shall have to take a call. Like Gandhi always used to say, like your needs, you have to do the balancing between your needs and your greed, for instance. And each person, like when we talk about this intergenerational and the intragenerational equity, each generation has to take a call, even if the regulatory regime requires or does not require. I need to have at least that minimum, because never ever you will have the license to have, free for all. You cannot have unlimited things. Resources are limited. Time is running out. So you cannot do that, The question is, will the regulatory regime be sensitive enough to take cognizance of it and put that into place, Huge amount of lobbies take place, huge amount of tug of war takes place, and I've seen that firsthand, how the bureaucracies, they really work, Legislations are like, we have the Environment Protection Act, which has been left deficient, that what prevails, like one of the judges, asked me this question recently, then what prevails if there is a conflict between the Environment Protection Act and the Air Pollution Act or the Water Pollution Act? What prevails? You created that literally a quagmire, for instance, and the machinery, like the so-called Green Tribunal, which was put into place in 2010 in India, National Green Tribunal of India, for instance. Again, there are wills within wills. The time will not permit me to go into this entire issue, but all of us, we are alive to it. I'm alive to Sri Lanka has her own problems. For instance, developmental problems are there. You need your, like the mega parks and pristine resources, the ocean coast, and now the new menace which has cropped up. I've seen on some of the costs, I think even including, Colombo and Gaul, for instance, the plastic pollution. They say if we do not take the call today, by year 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish. So that is a huge challenge, dumping of this entire thing, from the land-based sources into your water bodies, and it's going through the rivers and then into your ocean. So we are not even spared the oceans, and that is the issue which we have to. The challenge is daunting, and I would say that is why you often have the campaign, and which brings in the role of the civil society groups, the activists, the scholars, the students, and literally it has to be like the mass movement, because enforcement authorities alone cannot do it. There has to be people's participation, so far as these issues are concerned, and how best we can do that will decide, our future pathway, like the forthcoming work which has been put into place. I think by June 2022, when I'll come out with another kind of some volume on this, talks about envisioning our environmental future. I asked each of those celebrated scholars who spent a lifetime in this entire environmental regulatory movement. They made the careers out of the environmental regulatory system. I told them, can you look back and can you decide as to what happened, what actually transpired? Was it the correct path? Should we now make a different thing? There are different people who have been using different merely using nomenclatures, very, very fancy language, or those phraseology per se will not help us. The question is how far the action that you take, translate, or percolates down at the grassroots level. Do the people really feel the benefit? Really they feel little, fresh air, have clean drinking water, for instance, or minimal kind of a noise pollution. At least your lives will become little better, for instance, and only in that case, I would say, Earth will be habitable for it. I will not go into the issue of the deadlines and the people have been talking about little warning signs in terms of doomsday scenarios and those things. I will not like to go into that. I think the things will go on. We have a huge amount of, I would say, resilience. The human nature has a resilience, and they say ultimately the better sense does prevail. For instance, better sense does prevail, but we need to at least call upon, and I think somewhere, most of the developing countries are concerned, especially countries in South Asia, countries like Sri Lanka and India and others are concerned. Like what Rabindranath Tagore said, years ago, almost a century ago, saying that we have been running after the Western chariot, and we have been blinded by the dust, we have been blinded by the noise and everything. The question is, why not we have our own? And we did have our own self-sustaining patterns of living. Each of the countries have had that patterns. We have been really, so we need to do that course correction. We need to do the course correction, because Western model of development, is premised upon the fact of first creating the problems and then trying to find the solutions for it, and that is not sustainable. That simply cannot work. And I think we need to really, it's a time that we need to really make the choices, right choices. For instance, how far the choices we'll make, that will really decide our future pathway. And I think I'll stop here. I wish all the best for the deliberations in this session and even beyond. And I really congratulate the Central Environmental Authority for organizing this really excellent event, and have this even the virtual participation of people from different, and I think probably it's being webcast. So I will stop here. Thank you
very much, sir. Thank you very much for your words of wisdom. We are indeed pleased to have witnessed the thoughts of someone so knowledgeable as you are. Now let me introduce our esteemed panel of judges for today's event. Professor A. Sarveswaran, Senior Lecturer, Faculty of Law, University of Colombo. Professor Kamena Gunaratna, Senior Lecturer, Department of Law, Sri Lanka Open University. Dr. Kokila Kornasinghe, Senior Lecturer, Faculty of Law, University of Colombo. Mr. Ravindranath Dabare, Director, Center for Environmental Justice, Senior Environmental Lawyer. Mrs. Manjula Vimalasena, Director, Legal, Central Environmental Authority, Sri Lanka. I warmly welcome each and every one of you on behalf of the Central Environmental Authority to the International Conference of Environmental Governance. Today's event shall hold 5 oral presentations and 3 poster presentations on different topics pertaining to environment policy governance and regulatory reforms. And each contestant will face a Q&A session by the panel with a duration of 5 minutes. As our first oral presentation for the day, we have an abstract on utilizing the concept of research for society to drive research institutes working on commercial agriculture towards environmentally friendliness. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will share my screen. It's not actually it has been disabled now. Can I have sharing facility? Can I have sharing facility, please? Or may I?
Mr. Prabhat Abe Srivardhana, your presentation is with us. You don't have the permission to share the screen.
Sorry.
While I will, we will start playing your presentation.
Hello everybody, I'm going to present my research on utilizing the concept of research for society to drive research institutes working on commercial agriculture towards environmentally friendliness. This is the introduction to my research. It is very important to convert agriculture from subsistence to commercial agriculture, especially in support food security and sustainable development goal to zero hunger by 2030. In this regard, research plays major role in technology development and productive improvement in agriculture research. Here we present research for society concept as an ideal solution for impactful research. The problem is that in present research scope, socio-economic and political environment of the country is not sufficiently considered, especially their changes towards innovative commercial agriculture development. So, as a solution to that problem, we propose research for society concept, which contains 2 parts: social awareness and flexibility of research institute, and these 2 parts will be discussed in future slides. Problem to be solved. The way research practiced so far, without considering its social and environmental impact, is not going to work anymore, especially in period like COVID-19. So, to solve to this problem, we have to be aware of performance drives of research institute and research. Then these performance drives should be measured, and accordingly, research institute and their research should be adjusted so as to have well-managed agriculture research practice and as a research culture. This is our expectation from our concept. First, we have to identify key performance drives in research institutes. Then, there should be a well-formed strategy to manage research performance. Then that performance of the research institute should be measured and validated towards innovative agriculture research. Our methodology has 2 phases. Phase 1 to identify key performance drives, and phase 2 to test and validate those concepts, key performance drive using partial least square structural equation modeling. So phase 1, we identified 4 key performance drives, and out of them, research that bind with societal acceptance is very important and will be discussed here, along with the functional flexibility of research institute. So in phase 2, social awareness, performance of functional flexibility of research institute will be tested and validated, and also we will look at moderation effect of functional flexibility on social awareness as well as functional flexibility towards research for society concept. This is a conceptual model to be used in identifying, testing, and validating the complex structure of performance drives towards research for society key performance indicator. We have, as you can see in the middle part of the image, we have 3 very important latent variables: social awareness, research for society, and functional flexibility of research institute. To support these 3 latent variables, as you can see, there are collaborative community participation, social satisfaction, workforce willingness as also latent variables. So altogether we have 6 latent variables. Then we have 14 manifest and composite variables to support these key performance indicators. I will explain them in next slides. So the solution. We have social awareness, a latent variable supported by 4 manifest variables and another latent variable called collaborative community participation. This has 2 hypotheses. Hypothesis 1, social awareness has significant effect on research for society. Hypothesis 2, collaborative community participation has significant effect on social awareness. So I'm moving to the second slide. Functional flexibility of research institute as major latent variable. It has 4 manifest variables supported by 1 latent variable. So it has third hypothesis, functional flexibility support research for society through social awareness, and the hypothesis 4, flexibility has significant effect on research for society. So the manifest variables will contribute to flexibility of research institute. And the 5th hypothesis say workforce willingness has significant effect on flexibility of research institute. So the solution, the last part, very important part, that's research for society key performance drive, and it's measured through latent variable, and it has link with hypothesis 3 and hypothesis 4. So it has 3 manifest variable, a latent variable called social satisfaction, and 3 composite variables. So it has hypothesis 6, that is social satisfaction has a significant effect on research for society. Other 6 variables, latent and manifest and composite variables contribute to research for society key performance drive. So let's see how research for society works. Flexibility and social awareness practice sufficiently and simultaneously in the research institute. Then assess the flexibility of research institute regularly along with its readiness of addressing the need of the agriculture society. Then this key performance drive should be measured and monitored through those key performance indicators, and based on those things, data and information, decision should be taken. So we can have environmental friendly research for society here. As you can see in the left side of the screen, social environment issues, and etc. As discussed in the Research for Society Key Performance Drive, we can replace them with climate change, global warming, circular economy, and carbon footprint environmental things. So, if research institute needs to adjust their research more towards environment friendly, they can replace these left side indicators with indicators related to right side environmental, direct environmental focus indicators. So we have policy measures here, horizontal and vertical transfer of research through Research for Society. That means farmer to farmer, that is horizontal, then farmer to researcher, that is vertical transfer of research thoughts. Then innovation should come from ground level, that's better come from farmer level. Then facilitate organization designed to quickly adapt for opportunities and be competitive in the research field. Then we can use agriculture 4.0 technologies such as artificial intelligence to have incorporate into smart performance drives. So we have the conclusion here. Society and the environment, all components have been woven into one web to connected network. That connected network is one integrated unit. It also includes climate change, and it should withstand, balance, and satisfy the requirements of all its stakeholders. Social awareness provides good feedback on the need of sustainable research that society needs. So, our concept, Research for Society, is to guide research institutes towards environmental friendly commercial agriculture development. And thank you very much for listening to my research findings and research suggestions. And you are all welcome to answer any question regarding this research. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the Q&A session starts now.
Thank you, Subhadra. So my question is, when you say environmentally friendly commercial agriculture development in Sri Lanka, what are the challenges we have in Sri Lanka to promote environmentally friendly commercial agriculture development in Sri Lanka? What are the challenges we have? You got my question?
Now I can talk. Okay. I hear your question, and there are a lot of challenges regarding the commercial agriculture research with respect to environment challenges. One is that researchers are using a lot of resources without considering its actual requirement. So there is a waste of resources such as equipments and then the chemicals and those things. That's one challenge, and that it should be monitored through performance indicators. That is what one challenge. Then the other, there are another challenge that researchers are not focusing their research towards more environment friendly products. So sometimes if start at the beginning and planning phase using environmental friendly concept to incorporate it into research, then that research will be a very good one at the end of the it's at the output stage. So it's another challenge. Uh, I think I covered, I answered the question properly.
I have a comment actually. I found your argument very interesting, and the suggestions you have put forward are also very interesting. But it is based on the premise that research at the moment is not meeting these challenges that you identified. I think if you convert this into a long paper, it would be good for you to have a section where you prove that, because you're
Yeah.
making an assumption without really showing. You answered it to a certain extent now, but in your presentation you said research is not meeting these challenges, but you didn't really show. So you might have to, I think, do some studies to show your point. Otherwise it will be just an assumption.
Yes, may I add something to this? Actually, this research, later piece of this research has testing and validation parts. So we will have a questionnaires, and then collecting those information, and then this conceptual framework will be validated. Thank you, madam, for the suggestion, and I will note it.
My other question is, now when you talk about societal acceptance of research, how are you really going to ensure that all research is controversial?
Yeah. Yeah,
What do you mean by that?
there's actually it is a problem with current research. So if that is why we suggest the flexibility of the research institute should be there to cope with that. So if there's a policies and those things, and also the especially in resource sharing, and also guiding the researchers towards that end, then researchers will automatically adhere to those processes. So that should be established by some guidelines and good procedures. Otherwise, it will not be. But when you establish something like that, you have to have the consent from all parties, right? So, from researchers, from the society, from the if in the commercial agriculture field, then farmers, also the ground level farmers also, they should participate this dialogue, and then establish rules and regulation. Then the communication will be there. That I think that kind of thing should be considered here also.
So what you're saying then is also that research should be like demand driven, not that the researcher
Yeah,
should
yeah,
get an idea.
yeah. That's thing.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, your presentation is very interesting. You have used the word of environmental friendly agriculture, but when we talk of environmental friendly agriculture, we know the traditional agriculture agriculture methods which are rooted in each and every society are the most environmental friendly agricultural methods, right? Why didn't you use that particular word, and why didn't you connect your research on that area also?
Yes,
That means the transforming the traditional agriculture methods into commercial viable agricultural methods.
yes, that is true, sir. That the thing is that researchers, not all researchers are practicing that thing in their research conducting. So actually, that is why we suggest that social awareness should be there from a researcher, so that a researcher can also learn from the society, farmer, traditional farming and those things. So that should be there. That the thing is that this conceptual framework facilitate linking all of these good practices. I think I have answered your question properly.
Thank you very much. Your time is up. And next, we have our second oral presentation. As we all know, Sri Lanka is the home to several endemic species of flora and fauna. It is especially for this reason, it is considered a global biodiversity hotspot. But a growing environmental concern is the rapid depletion of endemic species. Our next oral presentation aims to shed light on the topic from point endemic to the point of no return, an updated legal framework for the conservation of point endemic amphibians and freshwater crabs in Sri Lanka. And your video will play now.
Good afternoon, esteemed panel. The abstract presentation that follows is titled From Point Endemic to the Point of No Return, an updated legal framework for the conservation of point endemic amphibians and freshwater crabs in Sri Lanka. The aim of this particular study was to select vulnerable point endemic species found inside Sri Lanka and to assess the impacts of climate change on their existence and thereafter analyze the legal framework surrounding the issue. Just to establish a bit of context, Sri Lanka and the Western Ghats, as we all know, are one of the biodiversity hotspots in the entire world due to the high rate of endemism in these territories. Sri Lanka also hosts many point endemic species. Point endemics are species which are only found or recorded from one particular specialized habitat or environment in the entire world. Generally, most point endemics are categorized as threatened species primarily due to their extremely restricted geographic range and the lower population densities when compared to other species. Now, this study focuses on point endemic freshwater crabs and amphibians in Sri Lanka for three key reasons. Firstly, both species show an extremely high rate of endemism. For example, the Sri Lankan freshwater crabs show 98% endemism, which has not been observed in any other faunal group in the country. Both these species also host many point endemics as well. Secondly, and along with endemism, is that a majority of these species are threatened with extinction, the point endemics being the more vulnerable. Thirdly, and as will be elaborated further, climate change has a direct impact on the survival of these species. This brings me then to the predominant issue that this study highlights, and that is, as mentioned before, climate change has a direct impact on the survival of these species. Why this is so is because both species are extremely habitat sensitive. They prefer the moist, humid conditions of the tropical forests where they populate and habituate in and around small aquatic habitats. As such, and in brief, soil composition, climatic condition, water quality, and other biotic and abiotic factors unique to that particular environment are extremely crucial and integral to the survival of this particular species. Furthermore, many of the species are extremely sensitive to polluted or silted waters as well. We all know that Sri Lanka is a victim of climate change. Furthermore, as identified in Sri Lanka's 6th National Report to the Convention on Biological Diversity, climate change in fact is affecting the overall presence and abundance of amphibians in the country as well as freshwater crabs, especially in the wet forest zone, and this is true when it concerns point endemics as well. Irregular rainfall patterns, temperature spikes, landslides, and other natural disasters induced by climate change will adversely impact the habitats and thereby the lifestyles and distribution of point endemics. The study also sheds light on the fact that climate change in fact exacerbates the impact of the ever-increasing anthropogenic interferences that cause habitat degradation and fragmentation. I now move on to the key findings of this study. Firstly, at the international and national levels, there is currently no exclusive legal protection for point endemic species. At this point, I must concede to the fact that designating certain species as point endemics might be a difficult and tedious task, primarily due to the ability of these species being recorded from elsewhere, which would deprive them of the label point endemics. However, following the precautionary principle, I argue that it should not be a restriction to afford protection to these species. Secondly, the existing legal framework is heavily centric towards mitigating human impacts without adequately addressing the impacts of climate change stressors on biodiversity. Once again, while conceding to the difficulty in addressing such issues through legislation, one cannot overlook the fact that what the existing framework has done is that it has essentially prompted states to merely take preventive action towards biodiversity protection. Thirdly, and this is an argument that I have highlighted, is that lack of research conducted is deemed a hindrance to employ effective conservation methods. This is especially visible through the dearth of information available on freshwater crab species in Sri Lanka. As a result, environmentally sound decisions are not taken for the conservation of species, especially those that are threatened with extinction. And finally, moving on to the recommendations, this study includes several recommendations that Sri Lanka can look to implement, and for purposes of convenience, I have broadly classified these under three headings. These recommendations can be useful in conserving all point endemic species in the country. Firstly, novel recommendations are proposed in the study to update the national legal framework. Statutory recognition and special protection should be given to point endemic species, including freshwater crabs and amphibians, in such a way that even when new species are recorded in the country, they are also automatically provided with this special protection. To this effect, a statutorily established research and conservation committee on endemics and point endemics is suggested. The rationale there is that such an organization not only has the mandate but also a statutory obligation to carry out conservation and research matters proactively rather than resorting to preventive measures. Any neglect of their action would be deemed ultra vires, and as such, there is an inbuilt accountability mechanism as well. In my opinion, such a proposal also aligns with the well-established precautionary principle in environmental law. Secondly, the existing legal framework, especially under the Flora and Fauna Protection Ordinance, can be used to secure and preserve the pristine nature of the sensitive habitats of the point endemic species. To this effect, preventing human interference through stricter implementation of the law is also crucial, and this must also include preventing human actions that contribute to climate change and that cause pollution. Thirdly, as we all know, the success of any conservation effort depends on the practical and the pragmatic measures, and as such, providing access to updated baseline data on species, climatic conditions, and other data, as well as methods such as community participation for conservation, are highly encouraged. The study concludes that effective utilization of both scientific data and an updated legal framework will be instrumental in ensuring the survival of the selected point endemic species and the other point endemic species as well. With that, I conclude this presentation. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And now it's the Q&A session.
for the very interesting area of research, Mr. Edrisinghe, as well as for the excellent presentation, very clear. And let me just have further clarification, because you have mentioned that existing legal protection on biodiversity is heavily centric towards mitigating human impacts without adequately addressing the impacts of climate change. Are you proposing to move away from anthropocentric to biocentric? Is that what you are proposing here? That is my first question. I have another comment. My second comment is that you, at one point in your presentation, you mentioned lack of research. But I actually noted down a question there at that point, but at the end you answered that question. But anyway, I will mention that. I think not lack of research, but lack of multidisciplinary research. So you very smartly answered that in your last sentence in your presentation. Perhaps you can elaborate on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, madam, for your comments. And I will firstly answer the first question. What I propose in this study is that preventing anthropogenic interferences into the habitats of these species is crucial, and that's something that the current legal framework has tried to cater to. But what I'm suggesting in this study is not to move away from that, but also to incorporate the conservationist approach following the precautionary principle, which would thereafter not only punish those who violate the law, but also impose a positive obligation on the state authorities and the other responsible parties to carry out active conservation methods towards conserving these species. Why I primarily propose this is because, especially given the nature of the species that I have selected for the study, merely preventing interferences into their habitats at this point will not ensure the prolonged survival and the distribution of these species, because they're extremely habitat sensitive. So it's crucial that we weave in that conservation element into our legal framework. And to that end, I have proposed the establishment of a dedicated research committee, which not only takes action after a certain breach has been done, but also proactively takes conservation measures into their hands. And in answering your second question, madam, I completely agree with your suggestion as well. But at the same time, I must add that out of the two selected species, especially concerning the freshwater crabs, there is actually a lack of baseline data and research that has been carried out as well. For example, by 1994 in Sri Lanka, only 8 freshwater crab species were recorded. But in the recent times, because research expanded, it has now expanded up to 51 species. And what I believe is that there are more species which are yet to be discovered. So on that line, I think continuous research and updating of the research is important. And as you also suggested, a multidisciplinary approach to this research, especially involving the particular communities of these areas towards conservation, is also equally important. I hope that answered your question, madam.
I just have a few comments. I would first like to congratulate you. You have picked up on a very specific and I think very interesting issue. And I hope you will expand on your research, because I think it would be very useful. Just a few comments. I think you probably raised the issue of climate change adaptation and mitigation, not only for humans, but also for animals and other species as well. So so in our climate change adaptation strategies, that would probably be an interesting point to pick up. I'm assuming you have done an analysis of the FFPO, the Fauna and Flora Protection Ordinance, and also maybe the indices to the Climate Change Convention. You are talking, are you suggesting that we have a special law, like perhaps the Endangered Species Act of the United States, targeting particularly endangered species, in which case we would have to target all endangered species? I don't know whether it would be practical to have a law for this kind of species only. My other comment was the Convention on Biodiversity does talk about both in situ and ex situ conservation. So I think there could be provisions under that that would also be relevant to what you are discussing. So these are just a few comments that you may want to look at if you expand on your research and turn it into a full-fledged article. But again, congratulations, that was a very interesting presentation.
Thank you very much, madam, for your comments. If I may just very briefly address points 2 and 3, what I'm suggesting in my study is not that we include a completely new law like the United States has, but rather draw from existing examples like the EU directive on habitat, the EU directive habitat, and the US endangered species. And I think the Flora and Fauna Protection Ordinance is comprehensive enough to incorporate the endemics and point endemic conservation into it. So I'm suggesting an amendment to the existing act. And in answering, commenting on the third point that you raised, madam, I agree that in situ and ex situ are crucial in conservation of species, but given the current context in Sri Lanka, where we are still continuing to research into these species, I think probably going along with in situ, and especially considering that the point endemics are extremely habitat sensitive, I think in terms of, at least in terms of these species, in situ conservation is the better approach to take, at least initially, until we fully understand the cycles of these species.
Okay, that's fine. I'm glad you are really looking into it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
I saw there were several recommendations in your presentation. Apart from the updating of legal framework, what is your view on making aware the judiciary to enforce the laws more effectively?
Thank you very much for your question, madam. And I think that's also extremely crucial because if we look at cases from other jurisprudences, like the Tellico Dam case, where a point endemic, that is the snail darter, which was a fish that was conserved primarily due to judicial efforts. I think when discussions of that nature come into the Sri Lankan jurisprudence, and when there is also awareness among the community with regards to specifically the point endemics and how vulnerable they are as a species and how they should be conserved, and when that discussion and discourse is in the society, it's through that we can inform the judiciary. And as such, when it concerns especially development activities, when it concerns conducting environmental impact assessment processes, when it concerns other development activities that have a direct impact on the habitat of the species, the recognition of a point endemic species and its habitat can actually be a consideration that is weaved into the development agenda. And as such, when the judiciary is aware of that, favorable decisions that would balance both the development and ensure that the habitats of these species are conserved can be achieved at the end of the day, which I think is a really good suggestion, madam.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will have the lunch break from 1:40 p.m. onwards. Please feel free to make your way towards the lunch area. We will reconvene to resume here at 2:30 p.m. Thank you very much.